They expect a reaction. That's the trap. They want your anger so they can say you're irrational. They want your explanation so they can twist your words. They want your emotion because it gives them leverage. But when you give them nothing, not a word, not a look, not even a shift in tone, you become untouchable, because silence doesn't mean weakness. It means control. It means you're not playing by their rules anymore. It means you've stepped outside the emotional battlefield, and they're left shadowboxing their own projections. In this video, you'll learn how to weaponize silence, not as avoidance, but as a surgical strike. How to use it to disarm manipulators, reverse pressure, and flip the power dynamic, without saying a single word. 1. The psychology of silence. Why it triggers people. Most people don't fear insults. They fear silence, because silence is a mirror, and when you give someone no reaction, they're forced to confront their own guilt, their own insecurity, their own unresolved need for control. Silence creates a vacuum in the conversation, and the human mind can't stand vacuums. It rushes to fill the gap with assumptions, projections, self-doubt. This is the trap. You stay quiet. They start replaying the last thing they said. They wonder if they crossed a line. They obsess over what you might be thinking. They lose the sense of dominance. And suddenly, you control the emotional frame. Why? Because people are addicted to feedback. They crave validation. Even in conflict, they want engagement, because engagement equals control. But when you go silent, you cut off their supply. You take away the control they thought they had, and it destabilizes them, especially manipulators. Manipulators thrive on pulling emotional strings, but silence cuts the strings and leaves them dancing in a void they no longer command. They insult you, expecting rage. You don't respond. Now they feel small. They ghost you, expecting you to chase. You disappear too. Now they panic. They bait you into defending yourself, but you offer no defense. Now they're the ones who look unstable. This is the silent reversal, where you say nothing, but say everything. Your calm becomes confrontation. Your lack of words becomes pressure. Your stillness becomes dominance. Because in a world full of noise, the one who can remain quiet holds the most power. 2. Why speaking often weakens your position. Words feel powerful, but used carelessly. They expose more than they protect. Every time you speak, you signal your emotion, your intention, your state of mind. And if someone is paying attention, they'll use it against you. You raise your voice. They know they've touched a nerve. You explain too much. They know you're insecure. You justify your value. They know you're seeking approval. Speaking gives away the map to your internal world, and once they have the map, you lose the battlefield. Manipulators know this. That's why they provoke you, not to understand you, but to make you reveal your position. It's not about truth, it's about control. And every time you defend yourself emotionally, you hand them the steering wheel. Now they set the pace. Now they control the frame. And you're reacting, explaining, bleeding information with every sentence. This is why silence is so strategic. Because it denies the opponent data. They don't know what you're thinking. They can't read your emotional state. They don't even know if they've won or lost. And that uncertainty, it destabilizes them. Because here's the truth. People fear what they can't predict, and nothing is harder to predict than someone who doesn't need to speak. Now let's go deeper. Most people speak to gain control, But in doing so, they lose it. They try to explain their worth. They try to fix misunderstandings. They try to maintain the relationship through verbal effort. But what they don't realize is, power doesn't explain. Power doesn't prove. Power doesn't chase. The moment you begin to argue your value, you've already devalued yourself. The moment you try to fix someone's perception of you, you've accepted their authority over your identity. And the moment you raise your voice, you've shown they have emotional access. But when you remain silent, composed, centered, detached, you become unreadable. And what's unreadable becomes intimidating. Because now they can't find your weakness. They can't locate your need. They can't trigger your response. You become psychologically sealed. And when you operate from that space, your silence says what words never can. I don't need to prove anything to you, because I've already proven it to myself. 3. Strategic silence in relationships, conflict, and manipulation. Silence isn't one tactic. It's a system, a psychological operating system you carry into every interaction. And when used correctly, it flips the power dynamic in 3 of the most emotionally volatile arenas: relationships, conflict, and manipulation. 1. In relationships, silence creates psychological distance. They text you something passive-aggressive. You say nothing. They pull away, expecting you to chase. You hold your ground. They throw emotional bait to test your feelings. You don't respond, not out of pettiness, but out of power. Because in attachment dynamics, whoever reacts less controls more. They want a reaction to prove you still care, but when you don't give it, they're left with their own emotional void. Now they're spiraling. Now they're questioning. Because silence forces them to feel what you used to carry: insecurity, doubt, fear of loss. That's the reversal. 2. In conflict, silence disarms the opponent. Most arguments aren't about truth. They're about control. And every word you speak while emotional is ammunition for the other side. But when you go quiet, they're stuck. They can't escalate. They can't reframe. They can't dominate. They expect yelling, tears, defense. You give them stillness, and that stillness becomes unbearable. Let them talk. Let them vent. Let them trip over their own contradictions. You say nothing. You don't blink. You don't flinch. Because silence is not the absence of fight. It's the evolution of it. The moment they lose emotional control, you've already won. Not with force, but with restraint. 3. In manipulation, silence becomes the mirror. Manipulators feed on access. Access to your attention, access to your energy, access to your emotional bandwidth. But silence cuts the supply line. They gaslight you, expecting you to explain. You don't. They try to guilt-trip you, expecting defense. You stay still. They twist facts, hoping to confuse you. You offer no correction. Now they're left alone with their own tactics. And here's the twist. Manipulation can't survive without engagement. Once you stop reacting, the system collapses. You become a mirror, and mirrors are terrifying. Because they force manipulators to confront their own game. You no longer need to win. You just refuse to play. Strategic silence equals emotional invisibility. You're still present, still watching, still choosing, but you've become psychologically untouchable. And that changes everything. Because silence does what words cannot. It makes them doubt themselves. It reveals their emotional dependence. It turns your absence into a haunting presence. Not because you vanished, but because you stopped feeding them. You didn't block them. You didn't argue. You simply vanished inside your own calm. And that's what haunts them most. Not the fight, but the fact that you no longer need it. 4. When to speak, when to stay silent. Silence is powerful, but only when it's strategic. You don't stay silent out of fear. You stay silent out of design, because every word you withhold is a move in a psychological game most people don't even know they're playing. But here's the key. Silence isn't always the answer. Precision is. So when do you speak? And when do you say nothing? Speak when your frame is locked. If you're still emotionally charged, still triggered, still unsure of your own truth, stay silent. Because if you speak from emotional reaction, you give away leverage, you become readable, and being readable is being vulnerable. But when your mind is clear, when your voice is calm, when your intention is rooted, then you speak, briefly, directly, without defense. Your words land harder, because they're not clouded with need. Stay silent when they try to provoke a reaction. Someone sends a manipulative message. Pause, breathe, delete your response. They want chaos. Give them confusion. Someone accuses you of something you didn't do. You don't owe clarity to people who trade in distortion. Let your silence say, I don't explain myself to people committed to misunderstanding me. You don't play defense in someone else's frame. You build your own. Speak to set boundaries, then silence to enforce them. Words create the wall. Silence makes it real. You don't repeat yourself. You don't beg to be respected. You say it once. Then let your absence be the echo. Because people don't respect boundaries you talk about. They respect boundaries you disappear behind. Stay silent when emotions are weaponized. You're in an argument, the energy is rising, the conversation is no longer about truth, but about control. Withdraw, not to avoid, but to dominate. Silence breaks momentum. It disrupts the energy loop. And when the loop breaks, the manipulator loses grip. Let them rage into emptiness. Let them spiral without a target. Let them confront their own storm. You stay still, because stillness always wins over noise. The rule of power: pause, observe, choose. Before every response, pause. Scan the energy. Is this a trap, a test, an invitation? If it's a test, pass it by staying neutral. If it's a trap, expose it with silence. If it's an invitation to reclaim control, speak once. 5. How to master the art of strategic silence. Silence isn't just a lack of words. It's a presence that dominates the space. To use silence as a weapon, you have to refine it into a discipline. Below are the core strategies. 1. The 3-second rule: break the reflex. Before you respond, pause. 3 seconds, no words, no shift in expression. Why? Because most people respond from emotional reflex. And reflex is predictable. Predictability is exploitable. But when you insert just 3 seconds of stillness, you disrupt the pattern. You give yourself time to observe, and you make them uncertain. Power begins with pause. 2. Speak in energy, not in words. Silence is not the absence of communication. It's the transference of nonverbal authority. Eye contact, posture, facial stillness, delayed response. These speak louder than words. In a room full of anxious energy, the one who stays composed controls the room. When someone escalates, you don't meet them. You absorb, observe, stay anchored. That contrast creates pressure they can't process. Third, control timing in text and digital communication. They message you emotionally. They want instant feedback. You wait. They leave you on read to trigger you. You leave them in silence for hours, days, indefinitely. This isn't about playing games. This is about owning your time, your frame, your energy. You don't respond until the emotion is gone and clarity returns. Sometimes you don't respond at all, and that too is an answer. Fourth, train psychological stillness in high-stress moments. Someone is yelling, accusing, performing emotional theater. Your instinct is to engage, to defend, to win. Don't. Instead, drop into your breath, slow your blink, relax your shoulders. Watch. When your nervous system stays calm under pressure, you become unreadable, and what's unreadable becomes untouchable. 5. Withdraw entirely when needed, the ultimate move. Sometimes silence isn't a pause, it's a closure. You walk away mid-conflict, you stop replying, you leave without explanation, because your absence speaks louder than your explanation ever could. This is no-contact silence, a full reset of power dynamics, and only those ready to lose control will ever dare to use it. Strategic silence isn't passive. It's precision, it's performance. It's a psychological message delivered without a single sound. I do not react. I do not chase. I do not explain. I decide. CTA. You don't need louder words, you need quieter power. Because in a world built on reaction, the one who doesn't react rules the game. You've learned how silence unsettles, how it confuses, disarms, and flips control. But the real power doesn't come from knowing. It comes from doing. So here's your challenge. For the next 7 days, speak 50% less, respond 50% slower, and watch what happens. Watch who grows uncomfortable. Watch who tries harder to pull reactions out of you. Watch how much clearer everything becomes when you stop feeding chaos with your energy. Silence is not weakness. It's the mark of someone who no longer plays emotional games on someone else's terms. And if you can master silence, you'll start seeing the truth behind every word, every guilt trip, every manipulative gesture that used to trigger you, because that's what they'll try next. When silence doesn't work for them, they'll use guilt to make you feel cold, to make you feel cruel, to pull you back into emotional submission. That's where we go next. In the next video, we expose the guilt trap and how people keep you emotionally bound without ever raising their voice. Don't miss it. Your power depends on it.